Hello, and welcome to Trustwave's 2023 Trend Predictions webinar. I'm Doug Olenek, Digital Content Marketing Manager at Trustwave, and your moderator today. Joining us is Trustwave's Jesse Emerson, Vice President of Global Solution Architecture and Engineering, and Ed Williams, Vice President of Pentesting. Today, Jesse and Ed will share their thoughts on what 2023 might have in store for the cybersecurity industry and how organizations can best prepare to defend themselves against cybercriminals. And they'll take a look back to see what took place in 2022. Now, before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Our webinar platform allows you to customize your screen. You are able to expand the slides window and view all the different widgets below, such as the Q&A panel and the resource list. Feel free to adjust the size and positioning of the different windows to accommodate your liking. Now, after Jesse and Ed finish with their discussion, we will have a question and answer period. If you have any questions, please don't be shy and place them in the area provided on your screen. And lastly, today's presentation will be recorded, and we will be sending a follow-up email to all attendees with a link to that recording. So, you know what, let's dive right in. And Jesse, can you give us a quick point of view on how you are going to frame your thoughts on 2023?
Yeah. Thank you, Doug. So, I've been in the cybersecurity industry for about 20 years, and the majority of that time I've been on the defender side. So I've been leading security operations centers. I've been, leading digital forensics and IR teams, threat intelligence teams, et cetera. So I'm going to have more of the perspective of the defender in this, trends and predictions conversation today.
How about yourself, Ed?
Hi, everybody. So as you can see from my picture, 2022 has been a particularly difficult year because I've seemed to have aged 20 years in the space of 1 year. Having been in the pen test space for an awful long time, I'll definitely be looking at from an attacker's perspective, how we get into environments, how the bad guys get into environments, and what can be done to stop that.
Wonderful. All right, now before we dive ahead into 2023, can each of you share a bit of a look back at 2022 at some of the major trends that we witnessed during the year? How about we start with you, Ed?
Yep, I'll go first. Thank you. So I'm, been a pen testing, having authored many pen tests. I'm a big believer in getting the basics right. And when I say the basics, I mean passwords, patching, good policy. And I call them the basics, not because they're easy, but because they're really important to do. And when you're talking about large, complex environments, they're even harder to do. So if we look back at 2022, we'll see lots of ransomware, lots of critical infrastructure that's been missing patches and remote code exploitation patches, vulnerabilities created against that bit of infrastructure. I'm just looking at my notes here. Microsoft, there was 4 remote code exploits against Exchange. Citrix, the Apache Log4j. Just recently, in the last sort of week, we've had APT5 with Citrix. There's been a Fortnite SSL VPN vulnerability, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's really important to understand about the basics. That's how ransomware gets in. That's how it moves laterally with weak passwords and missing patches. So it might sound really obvious, but it's actually really difficult. And what is almost sad in some ways, the reports I was authoring 10, 15 years ago are not massively different to the reports that I see created by my team today. The ability to get into an infrastructure, to be able to move laterally, to pivot, to privilege escalate, all those things are still very prevalent today and have been used in 2022.
Things never change.
Unfortunately not.
Jesse, how about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are some great points and call outs, Ed, and you're right. I mean, even looking forward at the predictions, we're still sort of trending to some of the same predictions that have been in place for a while, right? Because while the threat landscape does change really rapidly, a lot of the challenges that we're all dealing with and trying to defend against it haven't necessarily changed a ton. But, looking back at 2022, in the ransomware theme, we saw, this ransomware as a service really take shape and have huge impacts. Then we saw a lot of kind of changes happening in the landscape of the ransomware as a service threat actor groups, right? So we saw the Conti group, which was, kind of leading for the most prevalent ransomware as a service, threat actor out there kind of break up, but we saw Lockbit step right into that place and have a huge impact on organizations worldwide. We saw some really crazy headlines. We saw cryptocurrency exchanges hacked. We saw major managed service provider hacks take place with huge data compromises there. Cyber warfare was a big part of 2022 for us, especially with the things happening in Ukraine and other parts of the world. Continued targeting of industries like healthcare and manufacturing. We saw a lot of that taking place. And then kind of on the vendor side of things, we've seen some interesting trends happen in 2022. We've had this kind of consolidation of the security vendor landscape happening for a few years, but we had some major shakeups or acquisitions in the last year. We saw Mandiant become part of Google, for instance. We saw a lot of things happen with Broadcom and Trellix and these other organizations that were either splitting or merging or some combination of the above. But all of these juggernauts of the past for cybersecurity vendors have changed shape and kind of changed brands and identities. That's been an interesting trend. And then one of the other things I think is worth calling out from the last year was, it's been a couple of years now that Microsoft made a put a stake in the ground and said they're going to spend $20 billion on cybersecurity. And, I think in 2022, we really started to see the real traction and the impact of that investment from Microsoft. So, the way that Microsoft approached the market with, really smartly packaged licensing models with E3 and E5 and the way that they included certain capabilities and features and product sets just in their enterprise licensing model really shook up the cybersecurity vendor landscape, because now you have tools like Defender for Endpoint from Microsoft that's taking over on the endpoint. You have, even their Defender for Cloud taking over the CASB space and gaining great market share. Their Sentinel tool from a SIEM perspective is disrupting the SIEM market. But I think that investment from Microsoft has really had a huge impact on the way that the defenders and organizations are buying and using cybersecurity tools in 2022. And then, in our kind of to the point that you made about what you're testing for and the things that you care about, Ed, when we do threat hunts in Trustwave, one of the things that we look for are not only is a threat actor present, but, what are the things that a threat actor would be looking for present, very complementary to how we do a penetration test, but we're still finding the same things. We're finding remote desktop protocol open to the internet, as an example, right? Some of these just basics are still things that we've dealt with all through 2022.
Now, maybe before we jump ahead a little bit, Ziv Mador, who heads up our security research, and his team have done several blogs on the Russia-Ukraine war and the cyber incidents that have kind of spun off of that. Kind of curious, maybe could each of you just give a 1 or 2 sentence thought on how you see this taking place? Has there been a surprise in this? Did you expect there to be more of a cyber warfare component to what's been going on over there?
Yeah, I'll go first. No, I'm not surprised by it. In fact, I'm surprised it's not a bit sort of more of it has been brought to light. I think given where we are in terms of technology and digital transformation, I think it's going to be a major factor moving forward for all nations. It's definitely on the front of mind for everybody, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I don't think there's anything surprising about it. I think that the way that we start to see it just being demonstrated, and then not the fact that it's not as localized to where the actual physical war is taking place, I think is significant, right? Because there's tons of spillover from what's happening, either from the types of modes that are being used for exploitation and attack, spilling into the open marketplace, or the kind of collateral damage that's happening to organizations. But cyber warfare is something that we're going to be dealing with for the coming future. And I think the way that governments as well as private industries and security vendors all come together and collaborate is going to be really interesting and important for us in the coming years.
And speaking of the future, I guess it's time to look ahead a bit. So when you take a look forward into 2023, how do you see the threat landscape evolving this year? Ed, what are some of the trends you're seeing from threat actors, and what do you expect to be testing for as the most popular route for exploitation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think we saw, well, I don't think I know, we saw in certainly 2021, we saw a big shift towards digital transformation. There was a big move to the cloud. There was certainly in 21, there was a bit of a race to the cloud for, remote access and those types of bits of infrastructure. And off the back of that, then we saw lots and lots of organizations struggling with the security around that. It was sort of oh gosh, here we go. We've moved everything to the cloud. Now what do we do? So there was a bit of a catch up there. I think maybe we've caught up now. So the next step is, okay, what do we now do? Now that we've got that digital transformation, we've got that fairly secure. I'm not saying everything is secure. There's obviously 0 days coming out. There's obviously new bits of infrastructure. The next step now is adding the rigor around sort of digital transformation. So that could be access to and from the cloud, the ability to create virtual machines quickly or to create infrastructure quickly. That needs a really good process, a secure process wrapped around it. And then when you think about things like OT and IoT, these again, I think, are very sort of greenfield sites for us. We see lots of organizations speak to us with IoT and OT, and they're really sort of got no idea of how to package it, how to get their arms around what is quite new. So we try and break that down into, look at the network, look at the individual devices. What can you do then to wrap around that in terms of security? So there's lots and lots happening in terms of what's new. What I still think will happen, there'll be ransomware. The one, there was Microsoft signed drivers. I think it was yesterday, the day before. That is new and different. So that's really pushing the sophistication of ransomware up to the next step. As soon as you have the ability to remove EDR and security-related software from hosts, then it becomes very difficult for organizations to see what's going on within an environment. And that allows ransomware then just to propagate very quickly through missing patches, shared credentials, all those types of things that we've already spoken about. So I think we're going to see a lot of the old, continuing, poor patching, weak passwords, shared credential, passwords stored in clear text, passwords stored in Excel files. We still see a lot of that. Sounds really basic, but once you get into environment, those are the things that we are looking for, and those are the things that the band guys are looking for as well to move laterally. And then I think we'll see some of the newer things around OT, IoT, and while cloud isn't particularly new, the change that certainly AWS and Azure are pumping out. There's lots and lots happening, so it's a challenge for everybody to keep on top of that. And I'll just make one final point, I think. When we saw this race to the cloud, I think it's fair to say that there's probably a lack of cyber skill associated with that shift to the cloud. I think that's caught up, but I think there'll always be a lag then with the new things that cloud vendors are pushing out. So there's always that gap between what attackers are looking for and what the industry is providing.
All right. And Jesse, in a similar vein, what are some of the things organizations and vendors are doing to defend against and remediate these threats?
Yeah. No, thank you, Doug. And Ed, I think that, that's some great insights. The digital transformation, the rapid cloud adoption, we saw COVID drive, rapid adoption of remote work. We talked a lot about that over the last couple of years. Along with that, it drove, rapid adoption of cloud. We've been now, trying to stabilize in that operating mode where, we now have to go back and make sure that we have, secure configurations in our, platforms as a service and infrastructure as a service and SaaS systems, et cetera. We need to have secure remote access. And, a lot of companies are, catching up on, in implementing more thorough multi-factor authentication, right? We've found that there's weaknesses in some of the just email-based or SMS-only kind of MFAs, and so companies are evolving to the next stage of how do you defend by securing users and user access and identities with multi-factor authentication being one of the huge things that we're getting better at, but there's still a lot of catching up to do. The other thing is that the tool sets for what was cloud access security brokers, then have kind of extended into cloud security posture management and cloud workload protection platforms. All of this is getting easier to use to a degree, but still fairly complex. So as we're trying to secure those cloud environments, it's some of those tooling that organizations are buying into, and they're learning how to use those tools to their maximum effect, and secure their cloud and hybrid work modes through that. I think one of the big trends that we'll see continue and to gain momentum in 2023 is that very few organizations, if any, are trying to do everything by themselves, right? Like there has been at times in the past where companies would insource and build their own cybersecurity teams, and they needed to have their own talent, especially large enterprises where they could make those investments and build everything from cyber threat intelligence through 24/7 operations, through technology management, et cetera. What we're seeing is even the largest organizations are realizing that they can't do it all on their own. And so, there's more seeking of a good partner or multi-partner kind of a working mode for cybersecurity teams and cybersecurity operations. And they're not looking at it as just an outsource the job either, especially as you get into the larger organizations. They're looking for co-managed solutions or hybrid operation solutions, things that become an extension of their team that don't force them to, hand over the keys or the responsibility, but, find someone that's very collaborative to work with in that mode. So I think that, co-managed solutions are gaining in popularity and will continue to do that. We've seen MDR solutions really gain traction in the market. Gartner says that by 2025, we're going to have 50% of organizations will have an MDR service as part of their cybersecurity program. And, I think that based off of what we see in our business for adoption of MDR and the demand in the market, I think that's probably maybe even a conservative number. But, the way that managed detection and response services have a couple of things. One is that they've gained a more common understanding of what is MDR, and some of the industry analysts have helped us do that. But also the way that those MDR services can actually effectively detect things in not just an endpoint specific service, but something that would build off of this XDR trend that we've been seeing, extended detection and response. So that now you have a platform that is extended beyond the endpoint. It includes your cloud, your email, your identity, your databases, et cetera. And now you can do detection and response across a much broader set of systems and much more effectively. So that's going to continue, and I think that we'll be moving away from endpoint as the focus for these types of services and into more of a extended telemetry, extended system kind of a mode. Another thing that I just wanted to touch on was that again, everything old is new again, but our employees, our users, continue to be the most vulnerable vector of compromise, right? So, I think that we'll continue to see security awareness and education systems, solutions go out into the market that become more effective, things that integrate more, live fire exercises, more, tabletops, more live feedback, more of a, continuous education basis instead of a once a year type of security awareness education. I think that will be something that we'll see, shape up in 2023. And, I think that the other interesting item I just want to talk to is that, and it's sort of complementary to that idea of extended detection and response. In the past, we've had this idea in cybersecurity teams that the more data we could collect, all the logs, give me all the logs, give me everything from every application, everything that's happening in the environment. Let's put all of that into some central data repository, and then we'll, do really powerful analytics on that, and we'll find the threat actors that way. I think that we're moving away from that approach and into a focus or a reliance on more what we'll call high fidelity alerting modes and threat detection solutions, so that now it's not collect everything. In fact, collecting everything is not only expensive and difficult, but it adds additional liability to you, especially from a data regulation perspective. And these high fidelity tools that are built to detect threats as they happen are getting better and better, right? So you don't have to, piece together a whole bunch of disparate things in order to find a threat actor today. You have some purpose-built systems that are really good at telling you when a threat actor is present. And, our cybersecurity teams are organizing around those tools much more than we were in the past.
Jesse, did you want to add anything?
Well, that's me, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. Excuse me.
Yes, please. So Jesse made a really good point around partnering, and where we see pen testing and organisation and that collaboration work really well is when, obviously, what we do is very adversarial, but the more we work together, the quicker and the better we see organisations gain a level of cyber maturity and then continue to gain as they move through that sort of life cycle of asset management, vulnerability scanning, pen testing, red teaming. I think pen testing sometimes falls into the trap of being, oh, this is really, a one-off, a one-and-done type job, sort of almost transactional. Whereas where we see real value with clients is when we sort of move above that, and it's a real strategical sort of partnership. It's like a program of work where we, this is what we found. Oh, that's difficult to fix. Actually, if you just shut off that port, that'll probably mitigate the issue to a degree, or we'll find something else. Or if we're doing CI/CD type work, where we're sort of injected into a pipeline of creating code, we can sort of iterate and work through that. So it's more about, oh, you're bad, that's not very good. It's more about, oh, this isn't great. How can we fix it? And how can we fix it over the long term? Because as we all know, there's never a time where you sort of, oh, we're secure now, everybody back for tea and medals. That never happens. It's always a case of iterating and finding the next thing to work through. So I think it's really, really important to get that partnership. And once you sort of get over that initial hump of, oh, that's really bad, we're not on the same team, and on the same team, then you can really get a lot of quick wins done. And that is sort of 80% of security in my mind.
Excellent. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something more to say?
I was just going to sort of add on to that idea of doing pen testing as an ongoing program. We also see breach attack simulation, attack surface management, exposure management kinds of solution like that. That's I think becoming a much more popular way that we're trying to build vulnerability management programs as well. And a lot of that ties into pen testing as a service and pen testing as a program instead of pen testing as a point in time event, right? And I think that's really, it just goes with this idea of continuous security awareness education, continuous exposure management, continuous monitoring. We've known for a long time has been important, but these themes will continue.
All right. Maybe we could look forward in a slightly different angle this time. With the the increasing talent gap that still is in place and rising economic pressures, what do you feel the cybersecurity organization of the future is going to look like? Maybe we could throw it to Jesse first.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting, right? Because there's those two dynamics, right? On one side, we have this huge talent gap that continues to be an issue in cybersecurity, where there's just more demand than there are skilled and trained and experienced individuals to fulfill that demand. And so, we're trying to address that, I think, as an industry and as in the world with education, with almost vo-tech type of trainings. It's coming into college programs. I know we've been doing a lot of recruiting from different college and cybersecurity specific skills training types of groups to help build that talent. And then we also take it on ourselves to build talent within our company from junior to seniors. And I think that a lot of organizations are doing that same thing. It's very expensive to build that talent, right? And so, I think that that brings in the other part of your question, Doug, which is, we have these economic pressures where a lot of organizations are now being asked to kind of slim down their spend, and that includes across the cybersecurity teams in a lot of cases. So, some of the things that I think are getting cut are, employee development. Sometimes it's the team sizes. There's certainly a push to rationalize the technology footprint that these organizations have in their cybersecurity program. So, where we see today that a company might have dozens and dozens of tools, platform players like Microsoft and Trellix and others are kind of stepping in and offering more, I guess, some benefits to have a complete solution, although it may not be every category is industry leading, but together it offers a much better outcome and a better price. I think we'll see a lot of that adoption continue, as a result of being asked to rationalize your spend inside of your cybersecurity program. And I think it's also going to keep pushing us towards that idea of partnerships, right? So more organizations will outsource for those things that it doesn't make sense for them to do themselves. 24/7 operations is one of those things that has made sense for a long time. For most companies, don't need to do that themselves. They benefit both economically and from a performance perspective by partnering with someone else for those services. That's going to continue, maybe even accelerate, but it'll also go into, I think, some of the other kind of functions that are in the cybersecurity team to help not hire for the whole activity, but bring in partnerships for the bursts or something to give you that elasticity that you need without decreasing your security posture. But over to you, Ed.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think partnership is absolutely key. We know security is difficult, and it's something that you can't sort of half do. You either do it properly or you don't. I think partnerships is really key. I think what is really interesting is when I think back in my own career, how I got into security. I was a Unix admin bobbling along happily, and I then sort of discovered this security world, and somebody just gave me a chance. And as somebody who does a fair amount of hiring, I think it's really important to look at people who are not just within the security field. Like some of the best pen testers I've ever seen do not come from a traditional cyber background. They're music majors, they're business majors, they're everything and everybody. So that I think is really important, having that diversity, because again, thinking back to pen testing, it's how you think about things is really critical. It's not what you've been taught, but how you see things and how you sort of try and break things apart. So seeing how teams are formed within organizations is going to be really interesting moving forward in 23, 24, 25. So I'm quite excited about that. And then if I think about, again, how we do things in Trustwave, training is really important. We know the technology moves quickly. So one thing we've introduced is what we call the 5+5, where every member of my team has a set budget and a set number of days where they can spend on security training and looking to sharpen those skills and make sure that they're sort of moving things in the right direction. And it can be very broad as well. It doesn't have to be purely pen testing. It could be a cloud-based certificate, could even be something a bit more esoteric, like a CISP or something like that. So there's lots to do, but it's really, really important that people don't get left behind. It's too hard to break into cyber, because whilst it is difficult, the barrier to entry is high for a good reason, because we're after good people. But we should be really inclusive in the people that we get in there, because there's some brilliant talent around.
All right. Before we dive into the Q&A part, we do have a couple of questions lined up. Quick takeaway for everybody. Could you give two things that all of the attendees should do to help improve their cybersecurity as quickly as possible, like a 1, 2, 3 step that they can go back to their organization today and implement that'll help them in 2023?
Shall I go first?
Sure.
So the one thing that I would suggest is asset management. Really, really understand what assets you've got. The discussion I've had probably 10,000 times in my career is we've compromised X, Y, Z, and it always comes down to two things is the answer we get back. Firstly, I thought we turned that off. Or secondly, I don't know who owns that. So it's really, really, really important to get your asset management. Once you know what you've got, then you can do something about securing it. So I won't have two, I'll just have one. Good, robust asset management.
One is great.
Yeah, and I love that one, Ed. I mean, that would have been on my top 2 list as well. And it's funny because it's something that sounds basic, but everyone struggles with it, right? Whether it's implementing or maintaining a CMDB, asset management is a huge challenge. I, from a kind of defender perspective, just kind of pragmatic, I'd say that if you don't already have an EDR type of technology in your stack today, that we've seen that a good EDR/XDR type of a platform has just really changed the game as far as how do we defend and detect and respond to threat actors. So if you don't have that today, that's certainly something I would put on the shopping list. And of course, once you have that, extending that into a managed detection and response service that helps you get outcomes from it is, I think, one of the most important and impactful things that organizations can do from a defense perspective today. And I'll just leave it with that one, Doug. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get to the questions then. Here's the first one will be, can we elaborate a little further on the impact of Microsoft's EDR, XDR investments /focus on the cybersecurity industry? Jesse, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I can start with that one. I'd say, I'm seeing it in a couple of ways. One is that they actually are doing a really good job in producing industry-leading tools, right? So, there wasn't too long ago that you would kind of get laughed at for using a Microsoft security solution on a Microsoft product because, Microsoft Defender for antivirus wasn't the best idea. They've really changed their reputation and the way that their tools have worked just drastically over the last 2-3 years. And, the impact that that's having on the industry is that it's taking business away from some of the competitors especially on the EDR, XDR, and SIM and CASB fronts, right? Because, now a lot of organizations have entitlements to these tools from Microsoft because of their enterprise licensing agreement. And so it doesn't make sense for them to use a different product from a different vendor. And so, they're edging out the competition both just competitively, as well as through the way that they're doing their license modes. And so I think that's just putting, kind of pressure on the rest of the vendors in the similar overlapping landscape to find ways to really differentiate. And when you have as much investment and coordination as Microsoft does right now, it makes it a difficult competitive, item for these vendors.
Any additional thoughts, Ed?
No, I think that's really right. And I do think back to my early career with Microsoft, and they were certainly scorned upon for their security, but they've made massive strides in that time. So I think I totally agree with that.
Okay. The next question follows up on the previous one. What do you think of deep learning to replace EDR or augment capacities of EDR? Throw that out to either of you.
Yeah, I mean, so my perspective on deep learning is that it's certainly offers some very interesting capabilities. As an extension within this AI and ML space, deep learning, I think is going to become something that is just a capability and a feature within the industry-leading EDR platforms. I think it'll be an augmentation. I don't think it will replace it. I think that a lot of the kind of point vendor solutions around deep learning that that have been proven to help with ransomware and some other things will either get acquired or built into some of the other platforms. Although it's a very interesting approach and shows a lot of promise, I believe, from being able to detect and respond to things.
All right. Okay. Our next question. Excuse me. Recent breaches in Australia in the last several months. The questioner says, we've seen more data exfiltration more so than ransomware. Do you expect in 2023 this will be a trend, or do you believe that ransomware itself will continue to be on the rise?
I can take that one. That's a really good question. Both, in short. So I think ransomware will continue because I just think the incentives for threat actors to sort of get ransomware out there is still pretty high. In terms of data breaches, what we are seeing, certainly in SpiderLabs, is, I'll try and be delicate, is probably a lack of understanding around API security. So we've seen this big sort of push towards the cloud, and off the back of that then there's a lot of infrastructure and stuff that's been created, and sort of SASE projects on top of that. I do think we're slowly catching up with, oh, what are these API things? We know that APIs account for 80% of internet traffic, but there's still a bit of a lag between securing APIs. So it's really, we see this within pen testing. Can we do an API test? Then we get into the detail, and it's a little bit hazy as to where is, what we should be doing, the authentication, all the sort of OWASP top 10 things that we would suggest. So there's API security is going to be a big thing for 2023, along with ransomware. And I can see them dovetailing together as well.
All right. Last question is, does Trustwave offer any training or podcasts for security professionals to prepare for ATPs that are going to be possibly popping up in 2023 and other problems as well, not just APTs? Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that where I would point is a couple places. One is that we have a SpiderLabs blog where we publish all of our research, and including how to do everything from detect and hunt for things to how to protect yourself from them, or test against certain vulnerabilities and such as they emerge. So I'd certainly go and subscribe and look at the SpiderLabs blog as one of the first things that you can do. And then we also have a great tool called Security Colony, which is a place where we kind of crowdsource and collect and anonymize our consulting deliverables from Trustwave and make them available for a subscription back out to our clients. And within that, we have a ton of training materials, little videos, vignettes, things that help you train around certain topics, be aware of certain items. But it's a great resource. And if you don't use Security Colony already, there's a free subscription you can sign up for that gives you access to some of that. That's extremely valuable. So I would point you to those two places.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Can I add to that as well? We also have a CPS division, sort of professional services. So we can build things that are bespoke and that require little tinkering on the edges. So I would definitely suggest engage with us around that. I would be happy to build something.
Great, excellent suggestions. And with that, I think we're just about out of time, if not a little bit over, so we're going to have to wrap this up. I want to thank Jesse and Ed for their time, and to especially thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to attend this event. And please remember, everyone will receive a link to the recording in the next few days, and we ask you to please take the survey that will appear at the end of this session. Everyone at Trustwave hopes that you have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.